Indiana's starting quarterback from last season has transferred in to be the Knights starting quarterback, and I think Taven Jackson is going to struggle a bit on this offense. Really not that many playmakers to surround him aside from the running back in Miles Montgomery. And I think that the defense is going to be relatively okay, but UCF is looking to have a pretty rough year in the Big 12. They'll start out with two pretty easy games. You got Jacksonville State first. This one should be a win at home. And then North Carolina A&T, same thing. UCF really should be starting the season 2-0.
But their last non-conference game against North Carolina is not going to be an easy one for Scott Frost in his return to UCF. North Carolina has Bill Belichick coming in to be their head coach after coming out of retirement from his illustrious NFL career. And he's made some moves already during the transfer portal windows, particularly getting Gio Lopez from South Alabama to be the starting quarterback. And he has a lot of upside and can definitely bring another level to this Tar Heels offense. They do have a couple key players to replace on the defensive side of the ball, particularly Bo Atkinson, who entered the transfer portal. But overall, this North Carolina team is just going to be the more talented team overall, considering that UCF has heavily relied on the production of RJ Harvey over the last two seasons, and he is now in the NFL. Now, Miles Montgomery can pick up some of that slack as he was the primary backup to RJ Harvey last season, but I do think it's going to be a bit much to ask of him. And then for Taven Jackson, it's just going to be a really tough scenario considering that his entire receiving room is brand new and none of them are very good or experienced. The most experienced receiver out of them is Dwayne Thomas Jr., who is transferring in from Charlotte, who does have some experience, but he is going to be a really interesting player considering he is 5'8", 175. Not going to be a deep ball receiver. Maybe he is fast and can outrun the secondary of opposing teams, but he can't do it all himself. North Carolina will get the win here over UCF. And then they open up Big 12 play with a road trip against Kansas State. And the Wildcats are one of the favorites in the Big 12 going into this season. And that stems from Avery Johnson returning as the starting quarterback after a very successful season last year. A lot of his receivers are also returning. So this Kansas State offense looks very, very solid and is going to be one of the best in the conference. And defensively, I think they've made some strides forward and look like one of the better teams in college football going into next season. That's why they were a top 25 team in our way too early ranking. And I think on the road for this UCF team that doesn't have a lot of playmakers or just nearly as much talent as the Wildcats have, I don't think they will stand much of a chance here. Defensively, like Jonah said, this is really the only thing UCF brings to the table. They do have a lot of key players coming into the transfer from the transfer portal that I think elevate this defense, particularly Keely Lawson coming in from Virginia Tech, who has been very solid over the past few seasons, but he can't do it all himself from the linebacker position. So overall, this UCF team will not be able to pull off an upset here against Kansas State, dropping them to 500.
And then it's a matchup with Kansas, Jalen Daniels back at quarterback. And I think people are really hoping he's going to finally break through this season. And it's certainly a possibility. He's had a lot of hype around him the past few years. Some people even thinking he might be a Heisman Trophy candidate. I really don't see that happening this year, but I think that he's going to grow a little bit, and Kansas will still have a very solid offense. Overall, I think that Kansas is going to be a better team than UCF, particularly, like I was just saying, the offensive talent that they have. I think it's going to be enough to outscore UCF on the road. So the Knights will drop this one at home, falling to 2-3, and then it's a road trip to Cincinnati to face Brendan Sorsby and the Bearcats. Sorsby in his second year as the starting quarterback of Cincinnati. And I do think that Cincinnati is going to be pretty decent this year. They have a good chance to make a bowl game, kind of be hanging around 500, maybe compete with some teams that are near the top of the conference, pull off an upset potentially. I think Cincinnati, just all around, they're a better team than UCF. Again, early on in the season, too, we're still at the point where, with all these transfers that UCF has brought in, I think they're going to struggle just a little bit near the start. And that's another potential factor in this. One of their earliest road games, only the second time. They lost the first one to Kansas State, and I think they'll lose the second one to Cincinnati as well.
And another thing that might account for the struggles this offense might have early on is that they're bringing in three new offensive linemen from the transfer portal. And while they are all redshirt seniors or redshirt juniors, that still takes time to build that chemistry on the offensive line. So Taven Jackson might struggle early on and might get pressured early on in the season. And that might be part of the reason this Knights team struggles through the first couple weeks. They host West Virginia after that road trip to Cincinnati. And West Virginia is going to be an interesting team. Much like UCF, they are welcoming a former coach back to the program. Rich Rodriguez returning for the Mountaineers after being one of their best coaches in program history when he was originally there. But he has his work cut out for him this season, as West Virginia has lost over 50 players to the transfer portal and has taken in about 50 players to replace all of them. And that's just going to be a hard scenario for Rich Rodriguez to navigate. But he does have key guys returning from last season that elevates West Virginia's chances of being competitive, particularly with the return of starting running back Jaheim White. And they do have a quarterback that has been at the program for several seasons. So there's a little bit more upside, and I trust West Virginia a little bit more than I trust UCF. Yes, it is a home game for the Knights here, but I do think overall West Virginia has some players that I am a little bit more high on that I think bring a little bit more to the table than some of these transfers that UCF brings in. So they will drop this game, remaining winless in the Big 12, going into their final bye week as they approach November.
And then it's a matchup with the Baylor Bears. Baylor's a team that we're actually pretty high on. We think they're one of the dark horses for the college football playoffs in the Big 12. It's a really solid team that they have coming back, including Sawyer Robertson at the quarterback position. I do think Baylor's going to have a pretty solid offense. The defense should be a lot better this season. Just all around, the Bears are going to be a really good team. And I do think they're going to be significantly more talented than UCF, as we think they're one of the best teams in the conference. The Bears should run away with this one before a matchup with Houston back at home. This is one of the conference games that I think UCF has the highest chance to win in. The Cougars are going to have a relatively decent team, should be around 500. You got Connor Weigman at quarterback coming in from Texas A&M after losing his job to Marcel Reed last season. And just as a team, I think Houston is a little bit better than UCF, but the home field advantage being factored in, this is a game the Knights might be able to compete in. That being said, we are still going to go Cougars here, but this is one of those games that really could go either way for UCF.
And we're only picking Houston because they have a quarterback that has some real starting experience. Yes, Connor Wagman struggled at A&M early last season, but he was still a starting quarterback at an SEC school, and that is no easy feat. So he has some potential in him. He just needs to unlock it. And I do think Houston will be a better fit for him. The following week is a road trip against Texas Tech, and much like Baylor, the Red Raiders are one of those teams that we are very high on in the Big 12, and that is stemming from the fact that they have brand new football facilities and they're bringing in the number two overall transfer portal class. And yes, bringing in a lot of transfers can be something that we see as a negative because you have to build so many new connections. But when you're bringing in that much talent from your transfer portal class, it kind of pushes aside all of those negative associations with building a brand new team using the transfer portal. And another big reason why we're not too concerned about bringing in that many transfer portal players is because a quarterback is not one of them. They have Baron Morton returning as the starting quarterback from last season after putting up very solid numbers. And I think this Texas Tech team just got better from last season. They were very competitive last year. They put up good fights against some of the lower ranked teams in the top 25 throughout last season. I think this Red Raiders team is going to be very good, much like Baylor is, throw in the home field advantage, and Texas Tech will be able to get the win over UCF here. And then they host Oklahoma State. And this is probably the only game on their schedule in the Big 12 where I think they will actually be favored in, considering Oklahoma State was really, really disappointing last year, finishing winless in the Big 12. And Ollie Gordon was the starting running back last year, and he was coming off of a phenomenal season, but he fell flat on expectations, and so did this Cowboys team. And to be quite honest, they did not get any better this season. Maybe it was just a fluke year and they're able to rebound a little bit with the guys they have, but I don't think this roster is going to be able to compete with very many teams in the Big 12. UCF is going to be pretty much the only team that they might have a shot against, considering UCF is going through a similar kind of rebuild. But I trust this UCF team at home to finally get in the win column in the Big 12. I do think at this point in the season, the offensive line will be gelling together. Miles Montgomery will be able to take over on this offense. And maybe even at this point, Taven Jackson is able to feel a lot more comfortable and has worked out his connections with his brand new wide receivers. So UCF will get a win in the Big 12, moving them to 3-8 before another tough road game to finish off the season.
And that game is against BYU. The big story this offseason for BYU is the fact that Jake Retzliff transferred away from the program after some controversy within the program. And I think that they're going to struggle a little bit without him this season. Now, this 15% chance to beat BYU was when Retzliff was the quarterback. I'd say now it's probably a little bit closer to, 20, 25, somewhere in there, but still not going to be favored by any means. BYU still has a very talented team. They're going to be better than UCF this season. And I still think that they're going to be one of the better teams in the Big 12. They have a lot of solid players just all around. They should be able to win this game against UCF, even after breaking in a new starting quarterback this season. By the end of the year, when they get to this game, I think he'll be settled in nicely. Our way too early projection for the Knights was 4.85 wins. We had them going 4-8, dropped them one more game to 3-9, and the projection down to 4.4 wins, 2.35 and 6.65 in Big 12 play. The ceiling is going to be 7-5, 5-3 in the conference. There's definitely a lot of games on here that we talked about that could go either way. Potentially the Houston one, specifically Cincinnati, Kansas, maybe even. There's games UCF can win if the transfers pan out, but I think the more likely scenario is them hitting this floor where we have them at 3-9. So thank you guys for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in our next video.